We're going to continue our little breakdown of the text of Imam At-TaHawi. And we are here where the author says, may Allah have mercy upon him, وَأَفْعَالُ الْعِبَادِ خَلْقُ اللَّهِ وَكَسْبٌ مِّنَ الْعِبَادِ. And the deeds of the slaves are a creation of Allah and an acquisition of the slaves. So the slaves don't create their deeds, they acquire their deeds. And Allah does not acquire their deeds, He creates their deeds. وَلَمْ يُكَلِّفْهُمُ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى إِلَّا مَا يُطِيقُونَ. And Allah did not charge them or obligate them or make them accountable, but with what they can bear. Exalted is He. So what they can't bear, what they're unable to perform, Allah does not make them obligated to do so. There's a rule, which is that the unable is not accountable. There's no accountability with inability. وَلَا يُطَيَّقُونَ إِلَّا مَا كَلَّفَهُمْ. Like, for example, someone asked me, what if the Muslims in a community were racists? Could he skip Jumu'ah? La. He's able to go to Jumu'ah. وَلَا يُطَيَّقُونَ إِلَّا مَا كَلَّفَهُمْ. And they are not made to bear but what He charged them. They are not made to bear but what He charged them. Our Shaykh, he comments on this statement here, rahimahullah. He says, this word here, it's necessary. It has to be that the first vowel here is a dhamma. And that here there's a shadda and a fatha. So he says, there's no other way to read this statement of Tahawi here but yutayyaqun. He says, therefore, this way it is, the way we read it, it means they are not made to bear but what He charged them. But if someone reads this statement of Tahawi as وَلَا يُطِيقُونَ إِلَّا مَا كَلَّفَهُمْ, they cannot bear but what He charged them. They cannot bear but what He charged them. Sheikh says that's wrong, because we witness that the slaves are able to disobey Allah. If the statement meant they do not bear except what He charged them, that would mean they're unable to disobey Him. So he said it must be, and there's no alternative to reading this as وَلَا يُطَيَّقُونَ إِلَّا مَا كَلَّفَهُمْ. And he said, and we don't know, he means himself. He's basically saying, I don't know any explainer of Tahawi who drew attention to this. Shaykh says, Allah fataha alayna. Allah blessed him with being the one, as far as he knows, who addressed this point in this famous creed of Tahawi. Here we are 1400 years later. He says he doesn't know any explainer of Tahawi who addressed that. وَهُوَ تَفْسِيرُ لَا حَوْلَ وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ. And that is the explanation of the formula لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. If I translate that formula word for word, it would mean there's no strength and there is no power except by Allah. but that statement has elaboration, it requires elaboration. And Tahawi elaborated. He said, Naqul, we say that it means La hilata li ahad. No one has any maneuver or trick. Wala harakata li ahad. And no one has any movement. Wala tahawwala li ahad. And no one has any diversion or detour an ma'asiyatillah, from disobeying Allah, illa bi ma'unatillah, except by the help of Allah. And here the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, it would have been better had Tahawi said, illa bi'ismatillah, except by the protection of Allah Ta'ala, the ismah. But Imam At-Tahawi said, illa bima'unatillah, except by the help of Allah. Why it would have been better had he said, except by the protection of Allah, because it came in a hadith. Illa bi'ismatillah. Wala quwwata li ahad. And so what's that though? That's a criticism there. Imam At-Tahawi didn't say something horrible. But At-Tahawi is very massive scholar. So pointing this out here is not to take away from At-Tahawi, but it is to give something to our Shaykh. Because even though that's not the biggest issue, still takes someone who's special to point these things out from the ones who are massive mountains, like Tahawi. ولا قوة لأحد على إقامة طاعة الله. At-Tahawi continues to elaborate. He says, and it means there is no power for anyone to observe the obedience of Allah, وَالثَّبَاتِ عَلَيْهَا, nor to be steadfast upon it, إِلَّا بِتَوْفِيقِ اللَّهِ, except by the compliance granted to him by Allah. How many years is Shaykh after the Salaf? Now, Tahawi is like 1100 years ago. Al-Tahawi says, وَكُلُّ شَيْءٍ يَجْرِي بِمَشِيئَةِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى, and everything runs by the will of Allah, exalted is He. Yajri literally means runs. Here it means occurs, happens. Everything happens by the will of Allah Ta'ala. وَعِلْمِهِ, and in accordance with His knowledge. وَقَضَائِهِ, and His decree, which is His creating. تَكْوِينِهِ. قَضَائِهِ here is تَكْوِينِهِ, His creating. وَقَدَرِهِ, and His destining. قَدَرِهِ here means تَدْبِيرِهِ, His managing. So everything runs by the will of Allah, exalted is He, and in accordance with His knowledge, and by His creating and His managing or management. غلبت مشيئته المشيئات كلها. His will has dominated, defeated, overcome all wills, every volition. His will has defeated every volition, every will. وَغَلَبَ قَضَاؤُهُ الْحِيَلَ كُلَّهَا, and His creating has defeated all tricks. يَفْعَلُ مَا يَشَاءُ, He does as He wills. وَهُوَ غَيْرُ ظَالِمٍ أَبَدًا, and He is not unjust ever. He is never in violation. He's never in violation. That's a refutation of Mu'tazila, and it's a refutation of the atheists. The atheists who say, how could there be a God when he willed for calamities and injustice? يَفْعَلُ مَا يَشَاءُ. He does as he wills. وَهُوَ غَيْرُ ظَالِمٍ أَبَدًا. And he is never in violation, ever. He is never unjust. تَقَدَّسَ عَنْ كُلِّ سُوءٍ وَحَيْنٍ. He is exalted from every imperfection and every injustice, every violation. He is exalted from that. Injustice or violation or mishandling things, that's impossible to be attributed to Allah Ta'ala. وَتَنَزَّهَ عَنْ كُلِّ عَيْبٍ وَشَيْنٍ. And he is exalted. So he said, تَقَدَّسَ وَتَنَزَّهَ. They mean the same thing. But one might translate تَقَدَّسَ as holy, Holy. He is holy from, he's exalted as God from every every bad thing, and every hayn, which here means zulm, every injustice or wrongdoing. وَتَنَزَّهَ. And he is exalted عَنْ كُلِّ عَيْبٍ, from every imperfection, وَشَيْن, and every defect, every imperfection and defect. Shane, that means defect. But in English, someone's name might be Shane. So someone who speaks Arabic, if he met a person named Shane, he said, Masmuk, what's your name? He says, it's me, Shane. So maybe he would be surprised by that. لا يسأل عما يفعل وهم يسألون. He is not questioned about what he does. They are questioned. Allah does as he wills. And he has the authority. You said in the English book, it says he is clear from any evil or perdition. So I don't know that word, but maybe it means like what I'm saying. So you'd have to look it up, but inshallah just means what I'm saying, because I'm translating from just my own self. I'm reading here and translating for you. You're following along someone else's translation, which that's fine. So probably it's just means what I'm saying, because it's the same text. We're just two different people translating the same text. So if you want, you can put a footnote in what you're reading. Like you can say what I said, for example, if you want to, and just put it there on the side. And then if you want, look up that word in a dictionary and see what does it mean. And then maybe it means like what I said, and then it will be very clear for you. Inshallah. Imam At-TaHawi says, وَفِي دُعَاءِ الْأَحْيَاءِ وَصَدَقَاتِهِمْ مَنْفَعَةٌ لِلْأَمْوَاتِ. And in the living's supplication and their charities, there's a benefit for the dead ones. There's a benefit for the dead in the supplications and charities of the living. If you want, that's a clear sentence there. There's a benefit for the dead in the supplications and charities of the living. It means we believe that the dead Muslims can benefit from the worships of the living Muslims, that a Muslim could do a good deed and then donate the reward of his good deed to some dead one or dead ones. So he could give a charity on behalf of his dead relative, for example, or any other dead one, or something like that. Make dua for that one, and then Allah would answer the dua of the living one for the dead. So we believe in that. If you are away from the grave of the dead one, or away from the dead one, if you are away from the dead one that you're wanting to benefit, then you do your worship, and then you say with your tongue, "Oh Allah, give the reward of this to so and so," for example, something that means that. If you're at the grave of that one making dua or reciting the Quran, then you don't have to say, "Oh Allah, make the reward reach this one," or "make the blessing reach this one," or something like that. And you can if you want. But if you're away from the dead one, then you should say something verbally, a supplication, yani. Wallahu ta'ala yastajibu da'awat wa yaqdi al-hajat. And Allah, exalted is He answers the supplications. And He fulfills the needs. He answers the supplications. Yani, Allah Ta'ala saying that He answers the supplications, that includes rewarding the good deeds. That includes rewarding the good deeds. He rewards the good deeds. And if you make a dua, yani if it's rewardable, and when you make a dua, which is a good deed, He will reward you for that. That's included in answering the dua, rewarding you for making dua. Saying that He answers the dua, it does not mean that you're going to always get exactly what you ask for. So either you'll get what you ask for when you make dua, or Allah will protect you from what you didn't know concerning your dua, concerning what you're asking for. He would protect you from what you did not know concerning your request. Or He would reserve that for you for the afterlife, what you're asking for. And no matter what, He will reward you for asking Him. And so He answers the supplications. وَيَقْضِي الْحَاجَاتِ, and He fulfills the needs. وَيَمْلِكُ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ, and He owns everything. وَلَا يَمْلِكُهُ شَيْءٍ, and nothing owns Him. So if He owns everything, then that means no one else owns anything. So if no one else owns anything, then that would mean that we don't own anything. So then, is it right to say, for example, that you don't own your clothing or your car or your money or your house or whatever else that it would be said that you own? Yes, in one way it is right. And in another way, you have the permission to say it. So you can say that you don't really own anything in the true sense, in the absolute sense of owning. You don't own anything in that sense, because it already has an owner. You and whatever you have, whatever you have been given permission, whatever you have been given dominion over, you and whatever you have been given dominion over belongs to Allah. You and whatever has been permitted for you belongs to Allah. But you can say from another sense that you own something, and it means that you have a permission. You have a particular permission concerning that thing. Allah gave you the permission. He gave you the permission concerning that thing that He owns. And then this permission that He gave you, you can call it an ownership, but it's not the real absolute ownership. So then you can take your money that you have permission that he made it yours. And then you can spend it on whatever he allows you, because he really owns it. Whatever he allows you, you can spend it, not what you're not allowed to spend it on. You can do with it what he allows you, what he permits you. So that's a proof for you right there that you don't really own it, because he told you what you can't do with your own thing. At-TaHawi says, وَلَا غِنَى عَنِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى طَرْفَةَ عَيْنٍ. And there is no independence from Allah. Exalted is He for the blink of an eye. وَمَنْ زَعَمَ أَنَّهُ اسْتَغْنَى. You see here something in brackets. So without what's in the brackets, you'd read it. وَمَنْ يَسْتَغْنَى عَنِ اللَّهِ طَرْفَةَ عَيْنٍ. And whoever was independent from Allah for the blink of an eye. So what are you going to do with that statement there? So one person would panic there and say, what? Huh? How can he say that? And then maybe another person would say, no, it's okay. Yani, that's just a way of speaking. Whoever was independent from, he just said you can't be independent from Allah for the blink of an eye. And then when he said after that, so whoever was independent from Allah for the blink of an eye, فَقَدْ كَفَرْ, then he committed blasphemy. So he's not saying he's really independent from Allah. So that's why it's very important to understand modes of language, figures of speech, and other types of, I mean, there's all sorts of figures of speech. There's different ways of figures of speech. Figure of speech doesn't only mean you're using a word to mean a different word. There's different ways of figures of speech. Even sarcasm, that's a type of figure of speech. Nevertheless, Sheikh here, he added something into the text, but it's in brackets. You don't want to alter the text or manipulate the original text. It's in brackets there for clarity. وَمَنْ زَعَمَ أَنَّهُ اسْتَغْنَى. So whoever claimed that he was independent from Allah for the blink of an eye, فَقَدْ كَفَرْ, then he blasphemed. وَصَارَ مِنْ أَهْلِ الْحَيْنِ, and then he became amongst the people of perdition. That's the word you asked me about. Hain here means doom, halak. So maybe perdition means doom, but in that other spot that we just read a few lines ago, hain means zulm, injustice. Here means halak, doom, ruin. And then someone might translate it as perdition. وَاللَّهُ يَغْضَبُ وَيَرْضَى لَا كَأَحَدٍ مِّنَ الْوَرَى. And Allah, so very literally, this would translate as Allah angers and accepts, not like anyone of the creation. So first of all, we're not going to attribute to Allah emotions. When it comes to mutashabi attributes, the ambiguous attributes, there's some of them, if you take them by their literal meaning, they would imply or they would mean body parts. And some of them, if you took them by their literal meanings, they would be emotions. None of the attributes of Allah refer to body parts or to emotions. Any attribute of Allah that came in the Quran or the Sunnah and it seems to mean a body part like yad or ayn or wajh, it's not a body part like hand or eye or face. It means something befitting for Allah. And any attribute that came and apparently means an emotion, for Allah, it also doesn't mean an emotion. It has a meaning that's befitting for Allah. And those attributes in particular, Bismillah, their meanings for Allah is what they lead to. That's my attempt to say it in simple words. What they lead to, what does that mean? Means that when it comes to an emotion, okay, for the creation has a meaning. These words, they have some meaning that appears to us, that rushes to us. The words. Some of these words, Allah has attributed them to himself, or the messenger did. And these same words could be used for the creations, and they would be used for the creations with a meaning that doesn't befit Allah. And then one might not know how to explain them for Allah because he only understands what they mean when attributed to a creation. So what does this mean? Let's see. Let's start when it's attributed to a creation. These attributes like ghadab, that one might translate as wrath or anger, and rida, which one might translate as acceptance, and mahabbah, which one might translate as love, and bughd, which one might translate as hate. And these are confirmed attributes for Allah. What do they mean? These ones, when attributed to Allah, their meanings as attributes of Allah are what they mean in the end, or what they lead to. What does that mean? That means for the creation, these emotions would be having some onset, some inception, how they start. And then they have, because of their nature, what they mean, then they have some results. So, for example, if the human's emotion was love, then the inception of that is the liking and preference in the heart of the creation. So that's its inception. So when the person has the love for the other one, it says, I love you, come so I can torture you and beat you and whip you and starve you. So is that what one would do with whom he loves? Talking about the creation? La. Yani, so when he loves that one, what does he want to do? Then he wants to be nice to that one and give that one gifts and have mercy on that one. And likewise, for the creation, when someone hates another, then the inception of that is the inclination away from, to be inclined from that one, that subject of the hatred. That's the inception of it. And then what results from that? What results from that is, for example, depriving that one, or alienating that one, for example. And anger. So what's the inception of that for the human? It would be, for example, that his blood boils and his he has a certain feeling of resentment, for example, towards the subject of this anger. And then what's the result of that? What comes about from that would be punishing that one, for example, because of being angry. So then he's going to say, come to me so that I may beat you. So that's what that means for the creations. So how could such words be attributed to Allah and not mean what it means for the creation? Because out of all of what I told you, I'm talking about the concept, then what's not befitting for Allah is the inception part. That's the emotion part for the human. That's not applicable. this meaning or this concept cannot be attributed to Allah. As for the result, this part of the meaning can be attributed to Allah. So, meaning, the meaning of endowing on someone and blessing one and giving one status and merit, excuse me, that's applicable. That's not impossible to attribute to Allah. That's not non-befitting for Allah. The meaning of punishing or willing to punish, that's not impossible or non-befitting for Allah. So those attributes, the scholars said, their meanings are what they insinuate in the end, not what they mean in inception, not what they mean in inception, in the beginning, yani. So the way they say it is, their meanings for Allah is what they mean in the end, not in the beginning. So what that means is, they're saying the meanings of these words, if you attribute them to the creation, what they mean in the beginning is an emotion that cannot be attributed to Allah. And this, whatever is that emotion, it results in some action or some doing, for example. So this action or doing, what is it? Is it bestowing? That's not impossible to attribute to Allah. Is it punishing? That's not impossible to attribute to Allah. Rather, he would bestow, unlike the creation could bestow. And he would punish, unlike the creation could punish. So, وَاللَّهُ يَغْضَبُ وَيَرْضَى لَا كَأَحَدٍ مِّنَ الْوَرَى. Allah has ghadab and rida, not like anyone from the creations. Now, inshallah, what I just explained to you is clear. Now, the second thing in this subject is, do those words, if we were to translate them in English, do they work? So some of them work, and some of them might work, and even possibly some of them work even though maybe some brothers and sisters don't want them to work. That doesn't mean you have to use them, though. Not saying use it if it works, but might work. It's possible. So don't rush to judge a person as a kafir if he says something that has meaning of, appears to mean emotion. He says Allah loves. Some people, they say, I want to do what pleases Allah. You don't have to rush and deem him a kafir here. I'm not saying I don't say that personally, but you don't rush here. Very good chance that he, let's say it doesn't work. Let's say pleases doesn't work at all. Very good chance that he thinks that it just means, like what Tahawi saying, for example, something befitting for Allah. It doesn't resemble the creation in any way whatsoever. He's not a Wahhabi here. It's not like Wahhabi. That's what I'm trying to say to you. Be mindful there. Yes, Wahhabis will say Allah gets angry, Allah loves, Allah hates, and they mean he has an emotion because they are pagans anyway. So that's fine for them, doesn't bother them. All the details that I'm talking about with you, all of that doesn't matter to them anyway. All they care about is that it resembles the creation, but they're going to hide that part. Don't be confused there. Because even some of the talk of some people who are very strong against using words for Allah like love and wrath, for the reasons they present, the very reasons they present could be used for words they do accept, like accept. They say, we don't say love, we say accept. So really somebody could just tell them, you're just changing the word, that's all. Or like the word mercy. So don't be too hard here. But if you need to, advise a person, teach a person what's tanzih. A lot of times a person says, oh yes, that's right. Yeah, Allah doesn't resemble the creations. I didn't mean that. Right, let's move on. Imam At-TaHawi said, وَنُحِبُّ أَصْحَابَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. And we love the companions of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. وَلَا نُفْرِطُ فِي حُبِّ أَحَدٍ مِّنْهُمْ. And we do not exaggerate, or we are not fanatical in the love of any one of them. So we're not going to say about any companion of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam that he's a god, or that he's a prophet or should have been the prophet. And also, we're not going to fabricate for a companion. Like some people say, Muawiyah is the uncle of the believers. They don't have an authentic hadith for that, though. And then they're going to tell you, they're going to call you all kinds of stuff. And at the same time, they fabricate. They accuse you of things concerning the companions while they fabricate concerning the companions. وَلَا نَتَبَرَّأُ مِنْ أَحَدٍ مِّنْهُمْ. And we do not disown ourselves from any one of them. There's a better word there. It's not coming to me. So he says, we love the companions of the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Yani, that means we love that body of Muslims called the companions of the Messenger, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And we do not exaggerate in the love of any one of them. Now, that's an absolute statement there. Not a single one of them do we exaggerate in our love for him, or are we fanatical concerning our love for him. وَلَا نَتَبَرَّأُ مِنْ أَحَدٍ مِّنْهُمْ. And we do not clear ourselves or disown any one of them. That's absolute statement there. Means every single one who is a confirmed companion, we don't deny that. وَنُبْغِضُ مَنْ يُبْغِضُهُمْ. And we hate who hates them. There he went general again. وَبِغَيْرِ الْخَيْرِ يَذْكُرُهُمْ. And with other than goodness mentions them. We hate that one, whoever does that. Without goodness mentions that body of Muslims called the companions. وَلَا نَذْكُرُهُمْ إِلَّا بِخَيْرٍ. And we do not mention them but with good. This is where I'm talking about here more precisely. I talk about the companions of the Messenger of Allah as a general statement here. That's not an absolute statement. Some people find what I just said now very hideous. Say it's not an absolute statement. It's not, though. Because if it's an absolute statement, that would mean that all of what we're saying about the companions applies to every single one of them without exception in any case. Then, if you take it that way, then you're going to be in conflict with some hadiths of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, and even some reports from some of the companions in the tabi'un about some of the companions. So if a person does not mind to have contradiction in religion, then what he's going to do is take the statement of Tahawi here and say it applies to every companion, every single last one of them individually, one by one, in every single circumstance. Absolutely. And then when you produce hadiths for him that would show that the Prophet said about some of them this, or Imam Ali said about some of them that, or Al-Hasan al-Basri, he's a tabi'i even, he said about some of the Sahaba such and such, or so-and-so said about Muawiyah such and such amongst the followers of the companions or the companions. All of that, they don't care. So if you don't mind contradiction in religion, then that's all fine. You could just don't worry about it. But if you do mind contradiction in religion, which you should, then know that Tahawi's talk about the Sahaba here is general statement. What I was saying about the general statement. This part. This is where some people focus. وَلَا نَذْكُرُهُمْ إِلَّا بِخَيْرٍ. And we don't mention them but with good. Now, also, important point here, this is not an ayah from the Quran. The statement of Tahawi is not an ayah from the Quran. And the statement of Tahawi is not a hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. Yes, this statement of Tahawi is consensus, but has general meaning, not absolute meaning. Because of all what I already said. Because of other proofs, you have to put them together. You have to put the proofs together. They don't clash. If the Prophet said about a companion that he will be in hell, that's not nice. But he said it. And other statements, Yani. So not to go far there. We have lessons, we have recordings and documents about this with details. So whoever has a question about that, you can ask, inshallah. He says, وَحُبُّهُمْ دِينٌ وَإِيمَانٌ وَإِحْسَانٌ. Loving them, loving that body of Muslims called the companions is religion and faith and ihsan. Ihsan. I don't know how to explain the ihsan in this sentence here. I don't know which way to take the translation. So the ihsan here in Tahawi's statement, I'm not sure how to translate that. وَبُغْضُهُمْ كُفْرٌ وَنِفَاقٌ وَطُغْيَانٌ. And hating them, hating that body of Muslims called the companions, is blasphemy and hypocrisy and going beyond the boundaries. Wallahu a'lam. We'll stop there. He said, were the scholars from previous nations protected from being wrong, just as the scholars of the nation of Muhammad? I don't know any proof about that, because they went wrong. People of Jesus' nation, they went astray. The people of the Torah, they went astray altogether. Some scholars said that the people of the Torah, the people of the Injil, were not meticulous. They're not like the scholars of Muhammad's nation. The scholars of Muhammad's nation are meticulous. They said what proves that they weren't meticulous was that, for example, in the case of the Christians, that there was a false narrative that Jesus was killed. So basically what happened at that time when they killed a man on a pole and said it was Jesus? Just like what happens today when they spread some news. Oh, Jesus was killed. Oh, no, Jesus was killed. Oh, it's all over. That's it. Oh, let's throw in the towel, guys. It's all, we lost. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك